Hi, everyone. Yes, we are live. Thank you to all who have joined us. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar that is organized jointly by Kosovo Center for Security Studies and ХЕРА. So we often in Kosovo or in the region, it seems to be Bosnia and Kosovo and Serbia always part of the discussion, but I think the region is bigger, and at least for Kosovo, relations with other countries in the region carry potentially even much more weight, both in terms of factors like economy, but also in terms of our ability to help each other become more stable or unstable. And one such relationship is Kosovo and Macedonia, or North Macedonia, shall I say. And so it's my pleasure to welcome our dear friends and colleagues with whom we worked in different capacities throughout many years. I am very happy we have colleagues from North Macedonia, Mila Carovska, Dane Taleski, and Sanela Škriel, who are joining us, alongside also Ljura Polozhani and Jeta Ljošaj and Mentor Rajoli. Ljura holds in a way two hats. She is, of course, from North Macedonia, but works in Kosovo as well, has followed, of course, both countries, but I would say even more the region. Our topic today concerns the relations between these two countries, as you have seen, and social cohesion in both, and challenges or factors that can undermine or challenge that. Before inviting Dane to frame our discussion today, and then followed by Mila, let me just invite Mila first and then Mentor for just a couple of welcome remarks as the leaders of the organizations who are putting this together today. So Mila.
Thank you, Dan. Hi, everyone. In the name of ХЕРА, as in a capacity executive director of ХЕРА, I want to welcome you to this, I believe, interesting conversation and dialogue, how the social cohesion can be seen and treated as a security infrastructure for Kosovo and North Macedonia, but also for the Western Balkan. Looking forward for the discussion.
Thanks so much, Mila. Mentor?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this event. Actually, I'm very excited also myself to be involved in this discussion. Have in mind that Kosovo and North Macedonia are very close neighbor, and with a lot of issues to be discussed, but very rarely we hear a discussion where we put both together and discuss regional perspective from perspectives of our country. So I'm excited as well to hear the perspectives discussed during this webinar.
Thank you, Mentor. And I should note that this webinar is being recorded and will be published in our social media channels, I should say, in YouTube. So we also want to extend our gratitude to Rockefeller Brothers Fund, who is a big supporter of all of us, I think, in the region. Now, without further ado, let me invite a dear friend, a colleague with whom we worked for many years, and we just were talking before that it's been a year since we last met. Dane Taleski, or Dr. Dane Taleski, also the first ambassador of North Macedonia to NATO following the country's membership in this alliance. So Dane, please take it on. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dani. And first of all, I want to thank the Kosovo Center for Security Studies, ХЕРА IPPF, for putting this together. Very important and very timely discussion. As you said, as you introduced me as a former ambassador to NATO, I will try to bring in the discussion in the context of foreign and security policy, the developments in the region, and the relevance for democratic resilience and cohesion. Let me start off. I have few slides to better, it will be more interesting and better structured for the presentation. So, we go always back in most recent discussions to the unjustified Russian military aggression of Ukraine that really brought the deteriorated security all across Europe. You know, it has been years since we had, many years, many generations since there was war on European continent. But this has also had reflections not only for security in Europe, but also for the Western Balkans, as we are seeing unprecedented pressures and increased volatility. And there has been very heightened increase of hybrid challenges across the region. Malign foreign actors exploiting the vacuum, spreading disinformation, cyber attacks has become more often, and there has been political interference. You know, I've just put on the map, as you mentioned previously, prior to opening the discussion, there is a KFOR NATO mission still in Kosovo, but there is also EU4 mission in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So troops on ground are present and necessary to maintain security and stability still in the Western Balkans. And as the most recent events of September 23 showed with the clashes on the border, armed clashes between Serbia and Kosovo, that security is really precarious and fragile. So the key imperative, in my view, would be to strengthen Euro-Atlantic integration and regional cooperation. And if we zoom in on Kosovo and North Macedonia relations, on one side, we have very positive momentum. You mentioned that I was ambassador to NATO, but prior to that, I was the foreign policy advisor to Prime Minister of North Macedonia. I remember it was only back in 2019 that we had the first official visit of the Prime Minister of North Macedonia to Kosovo. And then during COVID times, the return first ever visit of the Prime Minister of Kosovo to Skopje. And since then, we have really seen an expanded dialogue between Pristina and Skopje in multitude of fields. What is most important in my view, that all this is underlined, it's underpinned with a shared alignment toward EU and NATO integration priorities, where both countries not only share the perspectives and the values, but also the strategic positions. And then, more recently, more joint infrastructure and cross-border regional cooperation has improved. On the other hand, both countries internally have internal polarization, like the political frictions that impede the consistency of policy execution. There are socio-cultural divisions, but are exploited. And this precarious internal political balance threatens the long-term reform consensus. If we see furthermore, there are other vulnerabilities and threats. I want to point out that for the first time in our recent history, we have the whole region is experiencing a geopolitical vacuum with the change of U.S. administration, cutting down of U.S. aid and other democracy assistance program. This is a lack of external support for not only, first and foremost for democracy and value-based kind of activities and Euro integration. The European Union is trying to fill in this vacuum, but I would say rather, inconsistently or with not so much concrete actions. I mean, there is a lot of political attention to it. There are new processes like the European political community. There is a talk of speeding up the EU enlargement process. But on the other hand, when you see concrete actions, it's still the old tools that the EU is using, and it's not really stepped up to fill in the vacuum that the US has left. At the other side, we have been speaking from malign foreign actors in the past, 10, 15 years that are exploiting the vacuum of slow down Euro integration processes. These are not new actors from Russia, from China, from other places. They have been around. They know well the region. They are supported by embedded local structures. There is also an issue to consider of actor and agencies. Sometimes these local structures across the region exploit the geopolitical vacuum and the strategic relations with Russia or with the West. But all this amplifies, and there are also entrenched narratives that are not new, but that have been plaguing the region now for a while. What is more concerning, I think, in the recent few years, and as we spoke prior to opening the discussion, this is a shared sentiment across Europe that there is a growth of anti-Western discourse, growing populist mobilization across the Europe, also reflected in our region, but that seeks to instrumentalize identity and socio-cultural grievances to have foreign and security policy impacts. At the same time, the democracy is threatened. There is a partisan capture and political pressures that undermine the democratic norms and institutions. I think if you read the foreign reports, EU or other sources of think tanks, they come to this conclusion throughout the region. The social cohesion is also under strain. We will hear, I don't want to go too deep and, preempt some of the incoming discussion where, civic solidarity and social fragmentations are being brought to the fore as one of the key instruments for political mobilization. And most frequently that note, it comes down to exploitation of values and identity. And these values and identities are then weaponized against in an anti-Western fashion to undermine the Euro-Atlantic institution and integration processes. So, this is the bleak picture that we are facing with lack of external support, with the deteriorated security situation due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So what is the way forward and the light forward? I think that we need to be more introspective, to look towards our own structures and capacities. First of all, we need to understand that this is a whole of society effort, that we are in a point of time where we need everybody to step up. Of course, the central and the political institutions who have won the elections and who are leading the legitimate institutions have the biggest responsibility, but it takes a whole village, to borrow, an American saying, and we need to really create conditions for an inclusive democracy where civil society, media, academia, and local institutions should play their part. I think more effort we need to put on overcoming the polarization and foster cross-cutting cooperation and institutional dialogue. If you go back to the theories of democracy, if you want to have a vibrant, self-sustainable democracy, is very important what Robert Dahl said, to create the conditions for polyarchy, where everybody, can cooperate with everybody, where there are no internal enemies, where politics is not a zero-sum game, and that we need to work across the political ethnic device to pursue the common reforms. Connected to that, I think that there is a need, politically to recommit to democracy and Euro-Atlantic integration as the only games in town. With the spiraling, with the security, the deterioration of security, there are too many talks of the stability of EU and NATO, and whether, other forms of regimes could be entertained or could be looked into, or could function more efficiently than the standard liberal democratic norms and institutions. I think that there is a need to recommit again from all political actors, all stakeholders, primarily political, but also others, that this is the long run that we are playing, that we are committed to democracy and Euro-Atlantic integration and values, and not to forget that Euro-Atlantic structures and integration are underpinned by the democratic values. And finally, we should not shy away from deepening regional cooperation on our own as a tool to drive the reforms, as a means to get us forward to also in Euro-Atlantic integration, but to improve our cooperation and well-being for our citizens, but always respecting the political independence and sovereignty, and having in the forefront the shared Euro-Atlantic future that we have. I hope that this was, concise enough and hopefully not long enough and interesting to frame the discussions, open the pathways for other participants to join in.
Thanks, Dana, and absolutely, I think this framing was brilliant in time, but I think there will be questions because you served in NATO, as you mentioned, at very interesting developments, at least for Kosovo, especially for Kosovo, right? So, but before that, let me bring in Mila and to also ask Mila to take this framing further, if that's okay, before bringing in Jura for some reflection, and then Sanela and Yeta. Yeah.
Thank you. Just to share the presentation. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dane, for framing us within the wider political and security picture. My focus here will be to set the social cohesion not just as a soft policy around our countries and region, but as a security infrastructure. And when we will have this discussion in the second part of this webinar, I believe that we have to try to create the links between the narratives that are happening within the societies, social trust and regional security. And what about we can do earlier and together to prevent further backlashes in Kosovo and North Macedonia, but also in Western Balkan, or to move from the current tensions that we are seeing to prevention and democratic resilience. We can see that in Kosovo and North Macedonia, we are facing similar patterns of mobilization of anti-democratic actors, even when the local triggers are different. Anti-gender narratives will be my focus now, but they are not isolated cultural war messages as someone wants to present to us. They are eroding the trust and they're weakening the institution. They legitimize the exclusion of some groups in our societies. Minorities, sexual minorities, different women and or other citizens that are in the countries and in the region. And the key question is how to detect the risks early and coordinate civil societies, institutions, and community before the crisis escalate. Anti-gender mobilization in Western Balkan is using some regional patterns. They are global, but still in Kosovo and Macedonia and the other Western Balkan countries, you can see that there is always a trigger. Sometimes it's educational laws, sometimes it's sexuality education, equality law, or prides. They're framing these triggers into the for-region agenda, attacks to family, to tradition, to values. It's always amplified by the religious and political actors, social networks and media that are in their ecosystem, always targeting women, LGBTI, CSO, institutions, or ethnic minorities. And the effect in the end is distrust into the institutions or civil society, fragmentation, and democratic backlashes. The base is not sexuality education on gender or gender equality. The basic idea is to have the democratic backsliding into the country. And what makes this regional? They're always using the same language across the countries. Gender ideology, maybe it's already close to you. You already heard that term. Protection of children, foreign-funded NGOs, Western dissidents. It moves between the political actors. They're always connected with political actors, religious or conservative networks, media ecosystem, and online influencers. And it turns rights debates into the identity and security threats, making the compromise among the society harder, but polarization easier, always putting the people in situation to divide and to be into the extreme sides. How it appears in Kosovo and North Macedonia, it's a different context, but the mechanisms are the same. In Kosovo, they are targeting identity and security narratives, meaning gender issues are linked to ethnic nationalism and broader fears about identity and statehood. In North Macedonia, they are connecting the sexuality education and gender sensitive education, and they're framing it into agenda that they are the threat to the children and family. What is the shared lesson? That it's not about gender, but it's about really delegitimizing the institution, civic society actors, but also they are attacking or connecting those issues with the Euro-Atlantic direction of both countries. The last example in North Macedonia that is very significant for us, and we believe that have to be treated jointly, it's a patriotic youth mobilization in North Macedonia. We are observing through the security or risk lens and framing it like that. Why? Because the public messages that are coming out from this patriotic youth mobilization are centering Macedonian identity, history, state, faith, and family. camps and youth activists are presented as discipline, belonging, and patriotism. Okay, till now, but risk signal to examine it is there because always are militarized, male-coded discipline, anti-dissident, they're using this type of language, exclusionary identity, and also manosphere-style idea about the strength and masculinity. The key question in our analysis when we are following this patriotic youth mobilization is this civic youth activism or is a parallel social structure that can be mobilized politically, religiously, or against the pluralism? The question that we have to put on the table is, does it build a cohesion only inside one ethnic national group, and why? Why only Macedonian? What type of message this is sending to Albanian, Roma, Turks that are constitutional groups in our country? And where are the boundaries between the sport discipline, civic engagement, and the paramilitary ecosystem, and who is benefiting from this? And we believe that definitely our society have to treat this more seriously. Kosovo and Macedonia have to have the practical resilience corridor jointly, because we are sharing a lot of vulnerabilities and they have to be translated into our joint capacity. That's why we have to monitor narratives happening cross-border, why and who is spreading them, civic society exchange regularly, institutional dialogue, but also we have to involve youth and other groups within our debates and dialogues. We have the few recommendations for cooperation because I was asked to propose something that we have to create the Kosovo North Macedonia early warning loop on Malayan and anti-gender narratives, because they are not just a gender issue, they are a security issue, to build shared evidence linking social cohesion, civic space, and security risk, bring security, democracy, pro-EU, youth, and gender actors in one conversation, not to have the parallel conversations about pro-EU pathway, about the democracy, about security and gender. We have to work together to respond together to the attacks that are happening to our democracy in the region, and to have the joint public communication that offers belonging and not the fear. Because democracy resilience have to be built before the crisis happen. The external interference is not the greatest threat to the Macedonia, Kosovo, or Western Balkan. The gradual erosion of trust, that is their main intention of the anti-democratic movements. They have the idea to erode the trust, social cohesion, and democratic dialogue. And also they always using and amplifying the existing division instead of creating the new one. We have to show that we are together and we can fight together against the division. And for sure, to achieve this, we have to recognize civil society as a critical democratic infrastructure, invest in trust as a strongest defense, and to build integrated regional mechanisms for early warning and coordinated action that are joint. Thank you, and I hope we will have a very fruitful discussion afterward.
Thank you so much, Mila and Dane, for this really amazing contribution. And as I said, relations between Kosovo and North Macedonia are very important, vital, I would say. I mean, as we said, with Serbia, for all the reasons, it's most attention, but economically, it's a very strong relation with North Macedonia, but also our ability to contribute to each other's radicalization processes, shall we say, right? We had in 2015 Kumanovo attack, as we know, but I think what happens in Kosovo and what happens in North Macedonia can feed each other, both for the right and for the wrong. And right now, I think what we are sharing is also a debate on the relationship between the majority community and non-majority communities. Of course, different arrangements constitutionally in Kosovo and North Macedonia, and commitments, but to some degrees there is this debate as well, that I think, as Mila, what I could understand, can be co-opted by other actors, by malign foreign actors, to further radicalized communities and help undermine social cohesion and destabilize the country. Now, as I said, Dr. Lura Polojani, a researcher from University of Graz, a member also of BEPAG, is with us, and I should say non-resident fellow with KCSS. She knows both countries very well. And so Lura, we heard from Dana and Mila, so it would be very interesting and important to hear your perspective, your reflection on this topic and on this relation Kosovo, North Macedonia, social cohesion, as Mila also said, and Dana, as a security framework, or understanding social cohesion through the security lens. And how do you see these recent developments, these narratives that we heard from also Mila on anti-gender and so forth?
Thank you, Dan. Yes, indeed, I have citizenship from both countries, so I'm always eager to have more cooperation between the two, and I think we're lagging behind in many areas, so I'd like to focus on that. I'd like to thank Dana and Mila for giving such a great overview of both the social cohesion and the security aspect of it. I've worked with Dana before when we were at the Prime Minister's office, and then Mila was also Minister of Social Welfare, and Sanela was working with Mila, so I really feel like this is an old staff meeting or something, so it's quite nice to have familiar faces who really care about security and social cohesion in the region. And I think care is also an important word. I agree with Mila that there's this need to look at social cohesion as a security infrastructure issue and not simply as a soft policy issue. I'll focus more on the ethnic aspect, considering that that is also an important aspect where we're talking about relations between the two countries. Now that I've been kind of based in Pristina more, I see that there are issues that are very present here, for instance, in the perception that people have of Macedonia, that people in Macedonia don't necessarily have of Kosovo, which is interesting. But I'll talk more about this, and I hope you'll understand what I mean. But first, I'd like to look at an important pattern when it comes to social cohesion, and this kind of draws also from what Dana and Mila were saying, and especially when it comes to interethnic social cohesion, which is a big part of both countries' stability, peace, and cohesive infrastructure, is that, for example, in North Macedonia, this year we filled 25 years since the Ohrid Framework Agreement. In Kosovo, also, it's been quite a few years since the Marti Ahtisaari plan has been kind of in the process of being adopted in different legislation. So in both countries, we have a robust, let's say, legal framework when it comes to interethnic relations. But then in both countries, the implementation is lagging behind. And here I would love to focus on this aspect of how both countries share a similar pattern of having externalized internal debates, especially when it comes to interethnic issues. In Macedonia, this has come in the form of taking every law to the Venice Commission before anybody bothers to explain a certain law. It goes straight to the Venice Commission, and every time there's any debate, it's like, okay, we'll ask the Venice Commission, as if the Venice Commission is God and whatever they say is going to be the last word, and nothing else should be said. But this has been used to kind of make the debate on cohesion a debate that is not of the country, but is this thing that we can externalize and we can send to foreign bodies. But it also means that we really, and in Kosovo, we have the similar case of not the Venice Commission, but asking the ambassador. So the Quint is always called for every interethnic conflict, as if, you know, they're going to enlighten us, and maybe they also do. But there's this idea that then this ownership of interethnic questions and on important social cohesion debates is being had outside these countries or inside these countries, but behind closed doors, when in fact these should be whole of society debates and issues which we get to discuss together. And one of the reasons that I think the implementation of laws and institutional practices that are related to interethnic issues is lagging behind is that we're not taking them to the bottom. So we're not going bottom up, we're continue having this discussion top down, and sometimes the top is not even in the country. And this has created this idea that social cohesion is a foreign or a malign or a, kind of this object that we have to adopt for some reason because the internationals want it, but we don't actually want it, when in fact these are questions that are integral to the safety, security, the dignity really of the lives of citizens in both countries. So I think this externalization of internal debates, what it has caused is also, it has caused these malignant narratives about said Western debates, Western countries. For example, I know in Kosovo, now with the elections, the huge debate that I kept watching is the American gas. And American gas was kind of used like this debate that it's an American gas, and we're not going to do this unless American gas. I was confused. I'm like, what is this American gas? Why are we talking about American gas? And also, why is it so important that some people want to enter government or not enter government because of American gas? And all of these issues that are integral to really the security, both energetic, social, in every aspect, they keep being referred to as these external things when in fact they come down to domestic questions, domestic debates, domestic institutions. So I find that our governments are actually very lazy very kind of, not even lazy, there must be some other word for it, but lazy is the one I can come up with now, in the sense that they are even afraid of taking ownership on issues that require political bravery. And political bravery is one of the most important things when it comes to social cohesion, because it means taking some decisions that might not be popular, but will serve the benefit of the citizens. And they're not popular exactly because of these narratives, either nationalist narratives, anti-gender narratives, but these are narratives, and governments should not only work on narratives, right? They should also work on policy. So in that aspect, I think this is an important kind of pattern that I see in both countries. When it comes to social cohesion, I think here there's a lot of space for civil society to cooperate more across borders. I think there's often, for example, I'll go to Skopje and I'll see a great study that has been done in Macedonia that I think should be done in Kosovo, and vice versa. And I think there's very little engagement between civil society. Thankfully, we're today in a great example of kind of this cross-border civil society cooperation. But sadly, this, to my view, is still an anomaly. It's still not a common practice, and I think it needs to become more of a common practice because political actors are cooperating, and they're cooperating in interesting ways. And here, perhaps also is the interethnic political aspect of how political parties in Kosovo, Vetëvendosje, notably has been kind of interpreted as being kind of a supporter of Vlen, and it is in many ways a supporter of Vlen, but this has had real life implications in North Macedonia. You have people who have voted for Vlen, not because of Vlen, but because they think Albi Kurti would like them. So in this sense, it has created this interesting kind of legitimacy loop that is not, again, it's an externalized internal debate. And in this case, with Kosovo. So in that sense, and of course, in Kosovo, you also have that issue with Serbs in the north and in other municipalities voting for a political party because Vučić tells them to vote for that political party. Again, it's an externalization of internal debates and narrative. So in that sense, I think Mila was talking about these different anti-democratic actors, and I see these anti-democratic actors working very well together, and then us, the people who we would like to call ourselves perhaps believers in democratic values, we're perhaps lagging behind a little bit in this cooperation. So I would like to see more of that. So that's a little bit of a self-criticism. And also, since Mila mentioned youth, I would like to end on a youth note, but with the Open Society Foundation's Western Balkans, we did this huge Gen Z survey, and we can see that with Gen Z, this is very much a battle we need to fight. This battle of that Dane was talking about democratic values, and Mila also, this is a fight that hasn't been fought and ended. This is a constant fight that we have to have. And with Gen Z, we can see that they're predominantly conservative when it comes to policies. When it comes to gender policies, they're less tolerant than on other questions. And when we asked them, for example, on the regional cooperation, you could see there was a huge language divide. So, for example, a Montenegrin went to Serbia, but he wouldn't come to Albania or to Kosovo. Albania would go to Kosovo, but wouldn't go to Serbia. So in that sense, there was this, and when we would see who goes where and who travels where, because we asked them where they would travel or where they would want to live in the region, they're all linguistically divided. And I think there's been quite some time that this linguistic division has been going on, when in fact we can very well communicate even in third languages, so we don't even have to, like we are doing now. But also there's this idea that, you know, like there's these kind of dominant narratives that have still carried over from the wars. So although Gen Z, for example, they were all born after the wars, it seems that those narratives are still predominant. So for example, youth in Albania were still talking in Serbia. Due to Kosovo, they would say we would have issues. But on the other hand, we also saw that young people are very open to cooperation, and they're very open to kind of reconciliation across borders. But I think they don't know how to do it, because Gen Z, unlike us millennials, Gen Z hasn't been a beneficiary of all these trainings on human rights and all of these things. And this is maybe also a call to donors, that they need to get back to human rights and democracy building, because this is where donors have kind of a little bit stepped away. But we can see with Gen Z that they didn't get the benefits of these trainings, these networks that we got the benefits of. And as a result, they really don't know how to access and how to reconcile or even to communicate with people from different countries. And I think this is also an area, a potential area where we can work more on cooperation, particularly as we're trying to rebuild kind of democratic values that have been in the region. But I think recently, because of all these crises, it's very easy sometimes to forget exactly, you know, why we do what we do. And sometimes we lose hope, but we keep working. So that's what matters.
Thank you
Anyway,
so
that's
much.
it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll remove the spotlight now. Thank you so much, Lula, and for adding also some facts behind the argument that Mila brought on youth and the importance of keeping an eye on these developments. And Gen Z, as you mentioned, Lula, particularly important because they are growing up, if we can say, or developing in a different context than we were, where there was much more exchange, I would say, facilitated externally. And nowadays with the social media echo chambers, I think they can be subject to disinformation, or interpreting or processing information in a different way. So quite an important take, I think, on Gen Z, and often also something that we are missing, I think, in our projects or interventions. And as you mentioned, yes, North Macedonia and Kosovo, we are continuing this. I want to thank Mila, because this kickstarted through our conversation with Mila, who reached out. Also from my end, though, I have always pushed as well, I think, on this dimension of relationship, because when you look at it, it is a very important, I think, almost symbiotic relationship between Kosovo and Macedonia when it comes to security, for good and the bad, as we mentioned earlier. But I guess Dane will come in after on this question as well, in terms of relations with NATO and security implications of if there will be no progress on further NATO expansion in Western Balkans in that dimension as well. But let me bring in now Sanela before Jeta for her reflection on this discussion as well. Sanela?
Thank you. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be part of this webinar with all of you, because it's not so often that we have at the same table discussion that brings together security and social cohesion, anti-gender mobilization. So this is a really great example because, as it was mentioned from all previous speakers, we definitely now see, and we have enough evidence to demonstrate the connection between all these aspects. And I will also like to highlight highlight what Laura mentioned, that definitely we need to strengthen the cooperation and the exchange, because as Mila and Laura said, the anti-democratic actors, they do tend to work very well together. So in a way, we should try our best to work much closer in order to preserve democracy as we know it, because it is a fact that democracy and human rights are under attack. So based on all previous speakers, I would like just few reflections. The first one is we definitely need to broaden what we understand as a security threat, because when we talk about security and stability in our countries, North Macedonia, Kosovo, and the Western Balkans, that we can no longer discuss only about the bilateral disputes, the organized crime, the borders, the military threats. Definitely, we have to examine the democratic infrastructure that makes some society resilient or vulnerable to crisis. And I strongly agree with the argument that social cohesion is part of the security infrastructure, and also that anti-rights and anti-gender mobilization should also be analyzed as a democratic security issue, not only as a human rights or equality issue. There are now plenty of research in all over, in our both countries also, that gender disinformation is not a side issue, but is a central pillar of broader feminist strategies when we talk about the foreign malign influence. Gender-based attacks always come together, connected with these political and geopolitical messages. So they always try to undermine trust in pro-European reforms and contribute to polarization. And we have seen that in North Macedonia. Whenever there was a push, towards the Euro-Atlantic integration, we have seen attacks. So maybe a couple of years ago, we were not aware of how well organized and with purpose are these attacks, but now definitely as I mentioned, we have enough evidence and research to demonstrate and support that. So the security concern is not disagreement about gender policy or some other policy as such. The concern arises from the fact that we have organized mobilization that uses gender, family, children, sexuality, to construct this idea of internal enemies and to weaken the trust in institutions, because at the end, we believe that that's the goal of this anti-democratic actor, because that's the worst thing that you can do to a society, to erode the trust in the institution. And unfortunately, we are witnessing that situation now in North Macedonia, where people lose trust in institution, and you have some kind of situation of apathy, and people lose the belief that things could be better. Then it's really easy to attack on the institution and further attack democracy in our country. And that is the point where anti-gender mobilization becomes part of this democratic security landscape. The second reflection I would like to add that we should stop thinking of the anti-rights mobilization as a spontaneous backlash, because we tend to use that, that backlash is happening in terms of human rights everywhere, all over. It's not spontaneous. It has become an infrastructure. There was a report last year presented in the European Parliament, prepared by the European Parliamentary Forum, The Next Wave. And there is this striking information then that 275 organizations have been funded with approximately $1.18 billion in anti-rights between 2019 and 2023. So the how to say, the opposition, the enemy that we are dealing with, and then compare this with the funding that is, Laura mentioning, the funding that we have is also decreasing in the areas of, human rights, social cohesion, gender equality. So just to see what are the forces on both sides. What is important is the origin of this funding. So this research has shown that the three main sources of this funding comes from within geographic Europe, Russia, and US organizations spending money in Europe. So we cannot call this a marginal movement, nor simply something that is important from Russia or America, because it has become this transnational political ecosystem. and which is exactly, again, why it belongs to the discussion about the democratic security. And this changes how we need to see this phenomena and how we need to approach it, because we are talking about an ecosystem. This is capable of producing the narratives, expertise, media, political networks, and even alternative services. Also, it was mentioned, and I think it needs to be highlighted, that the foreign influence is most effective when it becomes domestic. And again, this is why social cohesion is an important part of the security infrastructure, because foreign actors do not need to invent our divisions. Like we have it, whether it's like the ethnic tension, the political polarization, the distrust, the weak institution, the growing Euroscepticism. So they just need to build on that. And in order to build on that, they need the domestic proxies. And these actors, the domestic proxies, they can be found across politics, business sector, media, even civil society. For some, it's obvious, the connection, and others just use the same narrative as some authoritarian interests they represent. So that's why I think when we talk about establishing an early warning system, it's important to move beyond just the discussion about the source, whether the narrative is imported from Russia, whether the influence is from China, or it is Serbian influence through the Serbian Orthodox Church in Macedonia. But also we have to monitor and take into consideration who is localizing it, who is financing, which are the media that amplify it. For example, now in North Macedonia, there's a very vivid discussion about some media entering the country and the influence they are bringing. Which political actors legitimize it, and does it move, as we've seen in Kosovo and North Macedonia, also from social media into the municipalities, into the schools, into parliaments, into legislation or public policy. So we have seen this whole cycle in North Macedonia. In other words, we need to monitor these networks and the infrastructure, not only pieces of disinformation. Now, talking about all of this, I want to bring in the European Democracy Shield, but not just the European Democracy Shield as a program, but the European Center for Democratic Resilience and its stakeholder platform. Because I know that we agree that it's really important for Western Balkan countries to be part of this structure, not just as neighborhoods, but to be actually part, because all European reports concerning our countries are highlighting that we are under attack, under foreign influence. So if that's the case, disinformation, foreign influence doesn't stop at borders. We need to be part of this program, and we need to be part of this European Center. But when we talk about being part, what I think it's also very important that not just the government, not just the government-controlled counter-disinformation structures, but civil society needs to be part of this stakeholder platform. This goes particularly for our countries where institutions tend to be politicized. So it's not a good idea to have only government representatives in those structures. So we really need, and we are trying to put pressure to be part of civil society in the European Democracy Shield. Finally, we definitely need to move from countering narratives to building the democratic resilience and the democratic belonging. I think we saw, and it was mentioned previously also, that these anti-democratic actors, the anti-gender actors, they tend to play with the emotion of fear. We need to bring back that emotion of belonging, and having an ownership of the institution in our society. And in that aspect, fact-checking, debunking is necessary, but it will never be sufficient just to do that. And for this whole of a society approach that it was mentioned, it's very important, crucial. For civil society, that also means, I think, that we need to go outside our usual groups. That's why I think that this webinar and this combination and this cooperation is so important, because, we need to bring together organizations working on security, gender equality, minority, elections, democracy, youth organization, local communities. We need to bring everyone together. Also, we need to have, as it was mentioned, to create a network that is capable of recognizing this traveling narrative early. So I agree that Kosovo and North Macedonia can be a very practical political starting point, shared monitoring of actors, narratives, this common early warning signal, some kind of rapid exchange of evidence and coordinated responses, which goes back to the framing presentation that democratic resilience is something that we need to build before having a crisis. After we have a crisis, usually we have to deal with the consequences of what happened. And I think, and this is from the experience that we had in North Macedonia, that really anti-gender and anti-rights mobilization and the experience and monitor of this infrastructure can help us recognize the crisis earlier, before it happens, because it shows us exact moments where when fear is replacing democratic disagreement, where minority, as you mentioned, are becoming the political enemy. Everything that is the other and the different is becoming the political enemies and the one to blame for everything that's happening in the country. When you have a situation of blaming civil society to impose some foreign agenda, when traditional values becomes a weapon against, our Euro-Atlantic integration, that's when we know that actually we are not talking about indicators of, gender backlash in our country, but early warning indicators of democratic and ultimately security vulnerability in our country. So that would be basically my reflection on the framing presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sanela, for adding this layer as well to our discussion. And now to complete our initial reactions, let me invite my colleague Jeta Ljošaj. Jeta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Donnie, and thank you, everyone. I think I have the most difficult task to reflect on everything that was said, given that all of you really said a lot of things that are worth discussing further. But I will try to perhaps, besides concurring, also repeating and perhaps bringing something new, hopefully not super ambitious in terms of how can we, further strengthen relations and cooperation between Kosovo and North Macedonia. I think one of the platforms where I at least meet Macedonian colleagues are mostly through meetings that have to do with regional cooperation. But sometimes I have the impression that when it comes to regional cooperation, we only meet there, and then everything else is about bilateral relations that each of the Western Balkan countries have with certain neighbors. It's always about Kosovo and Serbia. When we're talking about Montenegro, it's about Montenegro and Croatia, whether they're going to stand in the way for the EU integration. And then it's North Macedonia and Bulgaria, and this entire mix-up that I think this sort of strategy of divide and conquer works only for malign actors, works quite well for malign actors. And it's something that we are, I fear, both we and the transatlantic community are failing to take a bit more seriously, I would say. So that is one of the things we have in common, one of the many things we have in common as Kosovo with North Macedonia, the vulnerability of being prone to foreign influence. Because I have a background in Russian and East European studies, I've really tried to explore how much or how Russia tries to exert its influence in our country and also in the rest of the region. And I think North Macedonia has had quite often some cases, like frequent cases of expelling Russian diplomats from the country, and similarly in Kosovo as well, even though we do not have diplomatic relations with the Russian Federation, but we do have that liaison office in Pristina, which remains a mystery to everyone in the country, because some say there's like 12 or 13 people who are actively working there, and I think there are, but at the same time we're just letting them be, and we don't know what exactly are their modes of operation. But anyway, that is one thing that we can further, as two countries, I think, both at the civil society level, but also at the political level, look into. Then we have the issues of identity and ethnicity. Unfortunately, these are elements that are exploited by people who have malign intentions. And I just had a thought, because this has come up in one round table where I participated recently, when we were speaking about, it was a roundtable about the interethnic cooperation in Kosovo and the future of the Kosovo Serb community here and so on. And then someone was giving the opinion, expressing an opinion, saying, well, it would be pretty good if we had someone from the Kosovo Serb community work at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Kosovo and, you know, in a way promote independence of Kosovo, international subjectivity and so on. And I had the thought that I thought, okay, we don't know exactly what all the representatives would think, but it just seemed a bit ambitious for me. But then I thought we've had these cases. We have ethnic Albanian in North Macedonia who's a foreign minister. So if it works for North Macedonia, then how can we have colleagues from North Macedonia replicate some of these lessons to the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue, or at least just in Kosovo? Again, I understand how ambitious this might be, but I think it would be something to explore. Apart from that, I think we could also, I don't know how much we as Kosovo can offer to North Macedonia, even though I do think we might be able to offer things in cooperation, but another venue for cooperation would be to explore the path towards NATO membership of North Macedonia. So we're looking at KCSS, we're doing some research, we've done some research with Donnie and the other colleagues to see how can we have, like, if not membership and partnership for peace, then at least some sort of enhanced cooperation. And I think North Macedonia, who is, I think, more than an immediate neighbor of Kosovo, could help us explore some of those paths. These are some of the main things I wanted to say. As I said, I think we're talking about regional cooperation, but I don't think it's just about a group of 6 countries, or maybe next year 4, depending on what happens with the Montenegro and Albania. I think it's more, it's a mix-up of bilateral relations, not just between Kosovo and North Macedonia, but then Kosovo, Montenegro, and then North Macedonia, Albania, and so forth. And I think there's a lot of, it was mentioned by the previous speakers, and Mila, I think she said that we need to have, there's many things we need to have in the conversation, and I think that's definitely true. I think we sometimes overlook how much cooperation in so many ways we have with North Macedonia, and I'm speaking something that's not perhaps related to security or foreign policy, but like in Kosovo, a lot of people go to Skopje for treatment, like medical treatment. Everyone knows it has a very advanced health system. And then in the past, at least if we talk about societal perceptions and so on, until Pristina developed a bit further, so many people from Kosovo used to go for shopping, for example, in Skopje. We would just say, oh, they have such advanced, they have like more franchises and so on. And now, recently, I've heard that it's becoming the opposite, that people from Skopje or North Macedonia are coming to Pristina, which is good in a way, but I'm glad that we're having these exchanges, as opposed to always letting issues that have sensitive issues that have to do with ethno-nationalism, sometimes even religion, like overcome the debate from that includes, you know, daily interaction, which is underestimated. These are my very modest reflections. So thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A part.
Thank you, Jeta, and thank you, Lura, for adding the flavor. They're coming from Veles too for this exchange. But I think it's what Jeta mentioned is we can look in terms of policies that can strengthen social cohesion. North Macedonia, like we had the not only foreign minister coming from Albanian community, but it was a prime minister for a certain time, now Speaker of Parliament, and I cannot imagine the reactions in our country if that would have been the case, for instance. Of course, we are talking in Macedonia, different numbers, larger community, whatever, but the point I think that we are trying to mention is the social cohesion is also fostered by the relations between communities in the country, and there is the level other non-majority communities feel being part of the story of the state. And we always, I think, often forget to mention, but in '99 there were 300,000 Albanians refugees in Macedonia, and we often I don't think we express a lot of gratitude so on that, and so Macedonia has been there, North Macedonia, for Kosovo in moments of crisis. But as I said, we also had this relationship of fueling each other's wrong side or helping radicalization. And perhaps even what we see today in North Macedonia, some might argue, can be a backlash of the liberal policies pursued by previous government of inclusion, if this was, because we also heard right from some policymakers or politicians reacting to this inclusion, to these appointments as, too much power for certain community, which is something we hear. So, but something that Jeta mentioned, and I wanted to ask, and now we can have this conversation between the panel. And I wanted to bring in Dane, but also to ask reflections from Mila and Lura, if it's okay. This idea that North Macedonia can potentially become the sponsor of the ambitions of Kosovo for more closer relations with NATO. Do you think there is space there, Dane, for something like this, or not? Or just in general, how do you see the future of NATO in our region? Kosovo is hungry for that. Do you see it also as a mechanism, like greater NATO integration can bring more social cohesion, can become a mechanism itself? Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel, for the question. I think there is a strong need and role for NATO to play in the region, but it's not a secret that NATO has its own share of internal problems and division with maintaining political consensus and discussions that are going on inside connected to defense, to priorities of the current US administration, the engagement of other allies with the war in Iran that US was pursuing. So, it's not, and I'm a big fan and supporter of NATO, but, you need to call the ace of spade. It's not the greatest moment for displaying and manifesting the strength and cohesion in NATO. But having said that, NATO is still very potent and powerful and is the most successful example of military alliance in the history of human civilization, and its capacity in terms of defending and deterring threats and challenges to security to all of its territory and all over the population is unmatched and unparalleled. I mean, by and large, not only North Macedonia, but other countries in the region, Albania, Croatia, that are members of NATO, have been supporting and vocally, supporting in many ways Kosovo and bringing Kosovo closer to NATO. Some of that, it's visible. Other things are not. For example, there have been events that myself and other colleagues have hosted when bringing or participated when bringing in high-level Kosovo officials to NATO to build in the partnership. However, for formalizing it, NATO is an alliance that it's a consensus-based, and you need the approval of everyone. And then I'm referring to the 5, non-recognizers. There is a divergence among them. They are not all equal with their views and perception of Kosovo and views and relations with Kosovo, but it's just a matter of formality that, to Kosovo to advance in its NATO integration pattern, to become full member of NATO, you need the consensus of everybody. That's how the rules of the game are currently set. But Kosovo is very important for NATO and for the security of the Balkans. We mentioned KFOR, which is the biggest and longest mission but not only that, EU4 is also in a Berlin Plus format, which means even though it's led by the EU, logistically, everything is supported by NATO, and the EU4 is a mission which is mandated by the UN, and it requires renewal every year by the UN Security Council, and NATO has plans in case of there is a vacuum to fill in that vacuum, not to leave a vacuum in the security and stability of the Western Balkans. And this all derives from a document that NATO adopted in 2023 that I was fortunate enough to participate in the negotiations and in the writing of the document. And this is the strategic concept of NATO. And in that concept, NATO defines two regions of strategic importance. One is the Western Balkan, the second is the Black Sea. Black Sea now, it's obvious because the war is there between Russia and Ukraine, and we see the ramification it has in Romania, in Poland, in neighboring countries, but also in Bulgaria and the wider Black Sea region. But also Western Balkans was put there, for a reason. So I do believe that Kosovo, and, just to wrap up this, it was just recently that NATO expanded, enlarged with Sweden and Finland, that people thought that this is impossible. It will never happen, especially for Sweden, having its long-standing identity of being a neutral country and non-aligned country, but it did happen. So, and now, Ukraine is on its path to NATO. In my mind, also Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina from our region. Probably it will be a different story with Serbia because they have constitutionally defined themselves that they are not interested into joining, which is, a sovereign decision, foreign security policy decision of any country. But as Kosovo has expressed clear willingness and clear preference for joining NATO, and it has maintained it and underpinned it with strategic foreign policy and security decisions, supporting Ukraine, supporting other activities of NATO to the limits and the capacity that it has. I do believe that not only North Macedonia, but other countries in the region, it serves to our best interest to have Kosovo also included in NATO as well.
Thanks, Dane. Mila, you want to come in and Jura? And also on this question, because we talk about malign foreign influence, but sometimes there is a discussion coming up also of regional malign influence, where we need to be committed to good neighborly relations, but sometimes our region, us with each other, can play a malign influence in our own internal developments. Now we have seen with Montenegro public spats, for instance, between the Montenegrin government and Serbian government about that relationship. I mentioned our own experiences, but Mila and Jura, and then also this question, right, on EU, on NATO, and their link to social cohesion. Sorry.
Thank you, Dan. The question is very relevant, and I believe that security threats that are in our neighboring countries can very easily spill off. Did you hear me? Because because I'm frozen. It can be easily spill off in North Macedonia, cross-border. And when we are discussing about the Kosovo joining NATO, is maybe the best thing that can happen to North Macedonia is our neighboring country to enter NATO. Are we ready to sponsor? I believe yes, because we succeeded. Dane and Lura were directly involved in that, and they know the pathway. And I think that we have the expertise and knowledge how we can support the process in the neighboring country to enter, or to maybe start going through the process to enter. Because as Dana said, I fully agree, maybe it's not the best time to open this issue because there are the cracks inside and debates inside within NATO. But definitely our Western Balkan region, it's a focus of NATO, and we have to use that possibility. But we, as a already member there, we maybe have to have this role of opening this issue, addressing this issue, and to promote that cohesion on Western Balkan among the country. It's very important and valuable issue that have to be treated. Because if one of us is out of the alliances and out of the union, then we are already far from the social cohesion of Western Balkan, because we are too small as a countries, too small as economies, and we have to work together to connect the dots and to find a way to be jointly integrated and together within the alliances in the union, including the European Union.
Thank you, Mila. And if you can hear me, I'm sorry, I think there is connection problems from my end. But let me bring in Jura then. Jura, please.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that There's an echo for some reason. Danny, can you go mute? Maybe then he won't have an echo. Let's see. Yeah, the echo is gone, but I think so is Danny. Or no, he's here.
I am back. Sorry, guys.
No worries. So I agree. I think Kosovo could make good use of North Macedonia's institutional memory of joining NATO. Joining NATO wasn't easy for North Macedonia either. It was actually quite an arduous process that required us to change the name. So we know what rejection feels like in that sense. But I feel from what has been my exposure to institutions in Kosovo, I think the institutions of Kosovo, and here I'm not including the military or security institutions, but more the ministries. I think a lot can be learned from how we did things in North Macedonia. So I think in that sense, a lot of knowledge transfer can happen and should happen. And I think we can work more on that direction. I think the problem in the region, as you mentioned, Dani, the problem is not that we see these malign influences from far off. In this study that we did with Reunir project, which is a Europe Horizon project, we found that, for example, in the Western Balkans, the biggest threat considered by citizens and mostly by experts is Serbia. And this is not just, for example, in Kosovo, but this was the finding in Macedonia, this was the finding in Albania, this was the finding in all the countries of the region, which means we see a threat from within the region. And this is already, if we talk about regional social cohesion, although perhaps social cohesion would be too broadly applied if we take it regionally, but if we talk of any trust building measures and policies such as that, I think this is something that we need to work on. So it seems like we have an issue with trust both internally, meaning we might not have full trust in our governments to always have our back, and this is a consistent finding in many of the countries in the region, but it's also that we need to build trust between the countries of the region, and this is far from happening. If anything, I think it's becoming even more acute. So in this sense, seeing governments work together on an institutional level, I think would do a great deal in establishing that kind of trust. I also think that, for example, the NATO and the EU path for Kosovo is very important, but the thing is that Kosovo is very optimistic about this, although Kosovo is not a candidate country. Countries such as Macedonia are losing the optimism. So I think here having some sort of cooperation where kind of we keep this EU spirit alive, but also help each other out along the way in different ways, institutionally, through CSOs and through kind of also non-formal channels. Here I would also include academia. I think we are very badly performing in terms of academic cooperation, and considering how, you know, young people, for example, are kind of, they don't want to leave, but they feel like they have to leave. In North Macedonia, the numbers are worse. In Kosovo, they're a bit better when it comes to young people wanting to stay. But I think opening regional channels might be a way to get around this inability sometimes to always be able to provide things within the country. So if we were to cooperate more institutionally, academically, in all these different levels, I think we can only get good things out of it. And here, I think I keep emphasizing institutions because I think very often this cooperation can rest on the political parties and who is in government. And I think there should be institutional channels that go beyond this. They should be institutional. They shouldn't be dependent on political parties. And I know sometimes this sounds like science fiction, but that's exactly how institutions should work. So in that sense, I think we need to build institutional independence and interdependence in that sense between countries so that we can build kind of, I don't know, more kind of a knowledge transfer regionally that would help all of us move forward. If it's not too utopian, I don't know.
Thank you, Lura. And I think because we don't want to move, obviously this is not about NATO or us being highly critical of one of our neighbors. There are discussions, right? There were even discussions within Albanian community in Macedonia about the role of Kosovo there sometimes. So this is an important, but what I think I'm taking from this is that there can be a hierarchy of social cohesion, that social cohesion at regional level can help social cohesion domestically. I think this is an important point to mention, as Lura pointed out. So, and for instance, countries who are ahead in the process in NATO, in EU, in NATO, Albania, North Macedonia, and Montenegro, can take us with them in a way. But we should also mention that both North Macedonia and Albania are already contributing in KFOR mission, right? So that this is another concrete initiative. But my question is, us as civil society, right? What are we missing in this dimension of Kosovo-North Macedonia relations? And what should be our next step in terms of fostering this social cohesion? The points both from Dane, but also from Mila of, being careful of anti-gender, how they're being adopted by also through the lens of nationalism and ethnopolitics. What else should what can be our next step? What are we perhaps missing, and we should do more? As we said in the beginning, there's a lot of investment on Kosovo, Serbia. We have a lot of meetings, a lot of exchange. But as I said, our relationship with North Macedonia is quite special for the good and sometimes for more challenging dimensions. So how can we move this further? I guess it's my question.
Danny, if I may, to bring in my 2 cents to the floor, I think Jetta, pointed to it that when the discussions happen about security and stability, it's usually through the lenses of the bilateral dispute. As you say, you say Kosovo and security, and then you immediately run to relations with Serbia, the dialogue, how is it going? Now Croatia, Montenegro, as with Bulgaria, and that is valid, but that's a different kind of level of analysis. I think what we were discussing here and unpacking is that while this is ongoing, the bilateral disputes and the lack of impediments they create to regional cooperation, Euro-Atlantic integration, there is something also happening under the radar with the geopolitical vacuum, with the lack of external support, with the deteriorated security landscape and more influx and inflation of hybrid challenges that are attacks to the fabrics of society and of our own democracy. And very often it comes through imposing and exploiting the existing socio-cultural divisions. And you see more narratives, and then they are bundled up in populist, usually radical right kind of mobilization. And they are, they are targeting women, they are targeting LGBT, they are targeting ethnic minorities, all. And this is, I think, is very important what Lura said, the youth study, that liberal democratic values and, the understanding that people are equal, they are born free, they have the right, to prosper, with their own identity and understanding and preferences, to be equally accepted and to be given a chance to contribute to the society. We should not take that for granted. So I think while the big attention and flashlight has been in the state level bilateral dispute and implication, this has gone under the radar, the social kind of level and the fabric, and this is very much intertwined to human security, and this can be kind of reinforced by looking more at democratic resilience and social cohesion. What are the practical steps forward? Maybe it's my NATO experience and I'm a little bit deformed. It's always the first step to be to assess and to create awareness, So I think what Mila mentioned, tracking the narratives, the cross-regional movement of the narratives, of the actors, of the implication, and mapping out what's going on. This is, I think, a very valuable first step in terms of describing the problem, and then we can go into analyzing the problem and providing solutions to it, and some were mentioned, you know, through the discussion, both by Sanela, but also what Lura mentioned, you know, keeping more interaction, more cooperation, more exchanges.
I think you shared your screen, Dane, maybe, or
no, Mila.
No.
Actually, yes, it's a part of my, because Dana mentioned it and what we can do. It's a recommendations.
Yes, now we see, yes.
You see?
Yes, now, yeah.
Okay.
Detect, convene, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's something that probably you didn't see my presentation before. I didn't know that. Nobody mentioned from my team. But the idea is to detect early, meaning to monitor narratives across border, not just in one country, but to create this Kosovo North Macedonia early warning loop, where malign and anti-gender narratives that are anti-democratic in the end are coming from a different side, to try to connect those actors that are the same and are very well organized, to organize ourselves better. Also to create a shared evidence base, because some of you are researchers, some of you are working on capacity in a civic space, but some of us are in a security topic, and we can jointly together develop some shared evidence base and share it with our audience, because with that we will bring together the in conversation security actors, democracy actors, pro-EU actors, youth and gender actors in one table, and in that conversation we can maybe create a joint action to fight back against this negative influence that is not happening just in North Macedonia or just in Kosovo. It's happening to the region, but for us practically it's very maybe productive to start Macedonia, Kosovo, and to create this network of sharing and to create the loop of trust. And after that, to prepare the joint communication that will offer a belonging, that we will invite the other sectors to join and work together.
Briefly, if I just...
Yes.
I think there's an echo. No, there's not. Lura, in her reflection, mentioned that political actors lack political bravery in our countries, but we have to admit that we as civil society also need to be more brave and not to hide away from the difficult topics. Not that we always do, but sometimes, particularly when we talk about the interethnic tensions, and you mentioned situation where political actors from our countries tend to use or misuse some kind of influence or cooperation, we tend, just to stay away. So I think that we also need to be more brave and to address, those topics, although they are not, because by default, we somehow work on topics that are not popular. So, so that's okay. We are used to it. As Mila mentioned now in her slide, that we need to, sometimes we miss the bigger picture in terms to look at the infrastructure, because as we talk, we tend to work in our topic, our silos, to deal with what is one symptom of this whole very well organized anti-democratic movement that we have. So with this early warning monitor system that Mila mentioned also, that we need to try to see the whole infrastructure, not just individual symptoms. So that is something that maybe we have missed so far, and that we need to, and we can do jointly better. And just to add on what you said about having the malign influence in the region, there was this meeting that we had, and there was this discussion about us being blocked first by Greece, by Bulgaria, I don't know, other country from some other veto EU member states, and we were citing the countries from the Western Balkan. And then we said, but can we sign something, to promise to each other that we are not going to block each other when, some of us enter potentially into EU? So of course we have to recognize that we have, also that influence, and that we really need, as Lura mentioned, work on strengthening that trust, between institutions, but also civil society has a huge role to play exactly there in that part. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Sanela. And I think we have a concrete idea that we need to bring forward, both what Dane said and Mila, mapping and this loop. So this is now our task or challenge next to try to formalize this. But before I end, I want to see if Lura or Yeta have anything else to add. Or
maybe just briefly one sentence. Again, I don't want to provide a pessimistic approach or something, but I think it is a bit telling how both Lura and I said that, some ideas are a bit maybe too utopian or ambitious for us to achieve, which I think it is telling about the lack of the desired level of cooperation that we would like to have. But this does not mean that we will not have it in the future. But again, having in mind the shrinking role of civil society, not because we deliberately want our role to be shrunk, but because of the lack of funding. But that should nevertheless serve as a purpose, as a goal for us to stay at least afloat. And then just one minor suggestion is that I always think that meetings do not always have to take place at capitals, but going to like other municipalities, like the local level, at least some of the
like
activities.
Veles.
Exactly. I really think those meetings sometimes reveal way more than just a very exclusive elitist meeting can take place in the capital city. So something also to have in mind for the future. But these were my remarks. So thank you.
Well, if it helps anything, I am attending this meeting from Feriza, Uroshova, so it's very close to Skopje.
You're almost part
online.
of Macedonia, really.
Yes. Lura, and then I would like Mila to perhaps say the final words.
On Veles, I really, like, the last time I went to Pristina Mall, I saw so many cars from Veles, and I was so amazed, like positively amazed. And I heard so many people speak Macedonian in the mall, which I really liked, in the sense that I felt like, before it was in Skopje that you only got this kind of mix, but now you also have it in Pristina. So I really like that. I think it's people who've never been to Kosovo before who come to Kosovo for the Pristina Mall, which might not be the most representative of things, but still it's a step forward. And I guess I take it upon myself to have a hopeful note at the end. And I would just like to say that as a researcher of social movements and of civil society in the region, like, we are lacking in many ways, and I think a lot of work needs to be done. But on the other hand, I'm also very inspired by civil society organizations in the region. The research that civil society organizations do in all countries of the Western Balkans, though in Macedonia, in Kosovo, Albania, it is really kind of forward-looking research, which I really like and inspires me, in the sense that sometimes I think we track behaviors, patterns before our Western colleagues do in the European Union, at least in the sense of noticing perhaps patterns very early on, perhaps because we're so used to conflict. So we tend to see the patterns of conflict very clearly, or also because we know how young our democracies are. So I think we still have in our collective memory this idea that, this is something young, and this is something that we're building, and this is something precious to uphold. And I think because we have this collective memory, we are able to track processes in a very kind of innovative way, I would say. And this is particularly what Sanela was saying in terms of kind of pushing for the Western Balkan countries and its civil society to be more integrated into the democracy shield. I think this is our argument. We really have something to give. We're not just following. I think in many ways we are leading, at least in kind of these early detection systems. And I think this is really like a big applause also to civil society in the region, because I do think they've sometimes been the only ones who have kept the battle going, and it's not been an easy one. But I'm also encouraged by the fact that, in Serbia there have been protests, in Albania there have been protests, and at times when we have thought that nobody's going to move and go out in the streets, it's exactly when people have gone out into the streets. So I think in that sense we do have, after all, an awake civil society. And I think in a way, at least in the region, this is really something that we need to be proud of in that sense.
Thank you, Lura. And Sanela also said something I really liked, which is that civil society also needs to be brave. And in recent time, that I think has been in not short supply, but could be in more supply. Okay, Mila, maybe on more optimistic than pessimistic note, although it was very optimistic, I think, on terms of the ideas. And I think we have a very good agenda forward that me and Mila and perhaps Dana and Lura and the rest of the colleagues can work together to push. And Yet and Sanela, of course, us here. And besides Menta, who I don't know if he is still with us with the camera or not, but Mila, the final words to you.
Thank you, Dan. Definitely on a positive note. And I want to say thank you to you personally, because I just approached to you. We are the organization Health Education and Research Association, following the anti-gender, but we are not recognized as someone who will discuss security in the country. And when I approach you and say, see, something is happening here, and we have to address social cohesion as a security infrastructure, and please help me, you just accept the idea, and not just verbally, but in practice. We already have the joint 2 debates involving relevant people, and already creating the steps in the next a few steps for the next few weeks and maybe few months. We will have the joint action on the ground, because we are maybe in the position where the civic space is shrinked, but we are still strong. And this is the time when we have to act together, because if now we didn't achieve the position civil society to be recognized as a critical for the democratic infrastructure, then we will be in a very big mess. But now still the situation in Western Balkan is not like that. And I believe that if we just bring everybody on the table, all different lines that are talking about EU, about democracy, about security, about the gender, and about the youth on the same table, and me and you, we have the capacity of that, then we will lose the opportunity. But I believe that we will use this opportunity, we will invest in our communities, and we will create this regional mechanism for early warning, and we will coordinate the actions in the next few months together, and we will show the success. Thank you again, Dan.
Thank you so much, Mila. And Mentor, do you want to say anything at the end? And then I want to ask for your patience to do a screenshot photo for us. Mentor?
Thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. I think that it's very important that this is not a one-off event. I think that it's very important for us to continue on this kind of discussion. And I think that we need also to talk a lot of cooperation opportunities, and not focus only on the challenges that we are facing, because I think that the potential for cooperation between Kosovo and North Macedonia have never been used. Somehow in the discussion tables, we have been acting as countries that are not so close to each other, but we are very close geographically, and also the communication between citizens of both countries is increasing. So I think that it's very important that we maintain this dialogue, and hopefully we will have more maybe also in-person events in the near future.
Now I think we lost Donnie.
Donnie's here.
Okay. Yeah, okay, he's back.
He's muted, I think.
Okay.
Dani is muted and in slow motion. Dani, we can't hear you, and you're moving very slow in the screen, at least on my part. You're very happy, but We can't hear you.
Well, he has some good screenshot pictures of himself.
Okay, I think my internet got blocked. Sorry, guys. Can you hear me now?
Okay, Donnie is texting me and he says his computer got blocked and he wants me to apologize to you on his behalf. And I guess close the meeting without a screenshot with Donnie. But since the meeting was recorded, I'm sure we can get a good screenshot out of it for posting it on the website or something. Dan, one more try? No? No.
I don't think it's working. No.
Well,
the voice is coming quite well, actually. Like you can talk.
Okay, you can hear me now. Yes. So sorry, guys. Somehow something happened. It went again. Okay, here it is. I'm back. Okay, let's do the screenshot. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, it's done. I will share it also in the chat so you can download, and then I'm going to end our meeting. And I want to thank you all for being with us. And on behalf of KCSS and HERA, Milan Mentor, very glad we could do this, and very grateful also to Dane, Jura, Sanela, and Yeta for joining. And Dane, we welcome back now your contributions to this very important topic. Hopefully, probably we will reach out on more discussion with NATO. As Yeta mentioned, we are hoping to have this conversation more in depth in Kosovo. But thank you all, and sorry for the technical issues, and see you in the next one. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
bye everyone. Thanks.
Bye-bye.